Well, it's exactly 2 o'clock, so let's begin this webinar. Thank you to all of those who've joined us. People are joining all the time. My name's Graham Watts. I'm Chief Executive of the Construction Industry Council, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this webinar, which is the fourth in the CIC series about the age of coronavirus. We've already had very well attended webinars related to jobs, the job retention scheme, furloughing, etc., the self-employed, the package of support for the self-employed, and importantly, what the industry needs to do in terms of recovery and turnaround. And if you missed those webinars, they're all recorded and you can still access them on the CIC website. Before I introduce our two panelists, just a sort of word or two about the technical side of things. First of all, we are recording, obviously, from what I've just said, the webinar. So if your opportunity to revisit the recording online, if you have to dip out or miss any of it. And secondly, we're having further webinars, which we will send out to people in due course. We've got another on dispute resolution in the age of coronavirus, and another one on professional liability and contractual matters. And I'm sure there'll be others in the series as we move on. Can I just say that if you want to raise a question during the course of the webinar, please try to use the Q&A box. Depending on what kind of laptop or iPad you're using, it'll either be at the top or the bottom of the screen. If you can't use the Q&A box, then do put it into the chat function, and I'll try and keep an eye on both, but we will predominantly be looking at the Q&A function. So I think that's all you need to hear from me. Let me then hand over. We have two panelists today, but I'll hand over first of all to Maria Coulter, who is the construction coach, but she's also the chair of the CIC Diversity and Inclusion panel. And later you'll be hearing from Teddy Hyde, but I'll leave Maria to introduce Teddy. So over to you, Maria.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So hopefully you'll be able to see my presentation. It always feels like you're in slow motion when you do this bit. Okay, and as Graham said, we're going to be hearing from Teddy Hyde as well. So Teddy Hyde is a psychotherapist and counsellor. So I'm going to be asking him some key questions to help us through this corona crisis. So mental health and well-being through the age of coronavirus is what we're going to be talking about today. And just to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I've been in the industry over 30 years. So I started life as a quantity surveyor. I was a project manager as well. And during the last recession, I saw a lot of negative behaviour and lack mentality. I saw a lot of unfairness. We experienced the low profit margins, which can bring about worse behaviour in people. We know about the boom and bust cycles that we do experience as an industry. And at that time, I had coaching myself, which helped me to understand myself, my values. I think when I realised that my number one value is fairness, that was a real game changer for me. And I knew that I wanted to help the industry do something different and find a different way of thinking and bring positive change to the industry. So I started Construction Coach in 2014, and I work mostly with SMEs and micro businesses and also individuals who want to change. So they want to change the way they're thinking and they want to change their outcomes as well. And I also think that this is an opportunity for me to bring about sort of all the experience that I've got through working with my clients, all the learning that I've gone through, the whole journey I've been through since I started studying to become a coach and then became a coach. I really do feel that, you know, I can help the industry over the next few months and beyond. Okay, so in this webinar today, we're going to talk about how coronavirus could be impacting on you as an individual. I'm going to talk about some tools and resources to help you, and that's where I'm going to bring in Terry's expertise as well. And also the fact that this is an opportunity to pause, reflect and reset. And I'm going to be talking about you as a leader and a manager. So what can you do if you're leading and managing your people through this? You as a business owner. So, you know, what can you do as a business owner to get through this crisis? And the talk about an action plan as well. So that's what we're going to be covering in this webinar today. Actually, Graham, I just wondered, I'm not being rude, but could you put yourself on mute?
Oh, sorry, yes. Thank you.
So first of all, just to give you a definition of mental health and mental well-being. So mental health is not just about the absence of a mental disorder. It's a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential. They can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. And that definition is taken from the World Health Organization. So first of all, I want to consider, you know, who are you as an individual? And this is a question that fascinated me when I first started doing my training to become a coach. And it's about what makes you who you are. So these are things like your childhood upbringing, your beliefs, your culture, your values, so what's important to you, later life experiences, and why you're seeing a picture of a rainbow cake. So I wrote a course on ethics a few years ago for the Chartered Institute of Building, and I was trying to think about what makes us who we are, and I had this flash of inspiration, or perhaps hunger, about cake and rainbow cake. So on the outside it looks plain, but when you cut through it, that's when you see the different layers of what makes us who we are. And with regards to beliefs, so I think in our industry, and I was talking to somebody the other day, I recorded a podcast on Friday about money and about our emotional attachment to money. And we were talking about some of the beliefs that we have in this industry, and we can have a real kind of lack mentality sometimes, that there isn't enough. There's not enough for us, you know, not enough to go around. And I think that can bring about a lot of negative behavior. And I think we're already starting to see those signs, as we have done in past recessions as well. And I just want to talk about human givens as well. So human givens framework originated in the field of psychotherapy, and human givens are a set of human emotional needs. And if these aren't being met, it impacts on our mental health and our mental well-being. And just to go through these, so we've got security. So that's about a safe territory and an environment which allows us to develop fully. Attention, to give and receive it, a form of nutrition. Autonomy, having the power to make your own responsible choices. Community, feeling part of a wider community. Privacy, opportunity to reflect and consolidate experience. Meaning and purpose, which come from being stretched in what we do and think. Intimacy, to know that at least one person accepts us for who we are. Status, sense of status within social groupings. And achievement and competence, a sense of competence and achievement. And I think it's worth noting as well that everybody's experiences through the coronavirus is different. So some of you may still be working at home through lockdown. Some may have been furloughed. Some may have been made redundant. You might have the responsibility of leading your teams and your organisation through this. You might be struggling to keep your business going. You might be juggling childcare with working from home. So we're all experiencing different things right now through this crisis. But I think looking at the human givens and, you know, what we need from an emotional perspective, you can start to see why this crisis is impacting on our mental health and well-being. So if we go back through security, well, obviously, you know, we're feeling insecure at the moment. We can't secure the environment that we're in right now. Autonomy, having the power to make our own choices, while a lot of choices have been taken away from us right now. So, you know, who would have thought, you know, you could never have foreseen what we're experiencing right now. Community, so, you know, feeling part of a wide community. I mean, some people might be living on their own through this, and, you know, that they're not being able to see their community on a daily basis. And also privacy, if you've got quite a few people trying to work from home, you know, that's really sort of impacting on people's well-being at the moment. I know a lot of people who are juggling childcare and trying to be productive at the same time. And also, you know, meaning and purpose. If people have been furloughed, then some of their meaning and purpose sort of might have been taken away from them. And achievement and competence as well. So you can see how this crisis is going to be impacting on people's well-being right now. And this is where I want to bring in Teddy Hyde. So Teddy Hyde is a psychotherapist, counsellor and retired professional dancer. And I'm going to bring in Teddy and ask him some key questions. But first of all, Teddy, do you want to give a brief sort of introduction about yourself and what you do?
Yes, thank you, Maria, for the introduction. Excuse me. As you said, I'm a psychotherapist, and most of my client base is in show business, and I specialize for dancers. I had a career as an elite dancer way back when, so I understand both sides of the situations. Over to you, Maria.
Okay, so when we had a conversation the other day, and I think what I like to do, and I think what is helpful is, like, if we bring in experiences from outside our industry sometimes, because I think we can be quite insular. So I think it's great to have you here, Teddy, right now to answer some key questions. And I know when we spoke the other day, we were talking about the correlation between dancers and people in show business and people in the construction industry, because we were saying how in construction, you know, it can be hard to show signs of weakness, and you said that, you know, that's something that people experience in your industry as well. But I just wondered, you know, based on your experiences, what key messages have you got from our industry right now?
I think there's other correlations as well, because freelancers are self-employed. There's project-based as well, so there's short runs of shows. And you mentioned about the showing a sign of weakness, so working through injuries, working through mental health issues. There's no work at the moment, so what's going on in their head? So people with a low-level anxiety, a constant low-level anxiety, which is rife in show business, their levels will start peaking, because anxiety is all based on what if. So you can go into fantasy world with what ifs and create greater and greater anxiety. What I'm suggesting to the dancers, and there'll be the knock-on effect for the industry as well, for the building industry, will be to set routines for themselves. So there's no work, but what can they do during the day? So they will write a routine for either the week, the day, so that there was a regularity about it. So for those that aren't working at home, that have been made redundant or furloughed, they need some routine, and that will help with their well-being, their mental health well-being. Other things can be, for those that haven't done it already, start a practice of meditation first thing in the morning. This might seem left field, but it does help the mental state. And so when there's a number of apps around. There's Calm, Headspace. You have to pay for those, but there's one called Insight Timer. It's 2 words, Insight Timer. That has about 20,000 different types of meditation sounds and different voices within it. Don't click premium, because you have to pay for that. There's still 20-odd thousand different types. There's a beginner section as well. So for those that haven't done it before, that at least can give you the ideas of what you need, and they talk you through it. So that is going to help a great deal. From there, the routine, you need sleep. So sleep helps. And if you can't sleep, then you've got the meditations, the sounds, etc., to help you to sleep. Looking at relationships at home, because of course we're all thrown in together here. If you've had a relationship that wasn't too good, maybe that could be reignited and working together on that, or it'll give you the understanding that it's not going to work and it's never going to work, and it's the acceptance of certain things. So the acceptance of the things you can change and the things that you can't. If you have an acceptance of the things you cannot change, in other words, what's going on in the world you can't change necessarily, is to accept that and let that aside so that there's less anxiety and worry about that, but to concentrate on what you can change and then change things for the better. Another thing that I suggest is for them to think about at least 5 things that have been positive about all of this lockdown. So 5 things that have changed for you whilst in lockdown, and then consider, would you want to keep those changes? So life is not going to be the same as it was. So there's an acceptance there. Can you keep those positive things going? Because most of you would have gone off to work, spend the day at work, come back, and you haven't been in a situation where you've been home, maybe with family or by yourself. So there's, as it mentions in the Human Givings, about intimacy, to be with other people, to be with other humans. Some people like to be solitary, so there's no real change there. I think for the moment, Maria, do you want to question me on anything that I've said?
I don't think so. I mean, it makes perfect sense what you're saying, and also some of the things that you've mentioned I've included in my presentation as well about meditation. So I recently recorded a podcast with a woman called Joanna May, who's on a mission to bring meditation to the construction industry, and she was talking about you know, how meditation can positively impact on you. So yeah, and I've put down about the Calm apps as well. What you were saying about sleep, I know on the Calm app, if you do pay for it as well, and I don't think it's hugely expensive, but there are things like bedtime stories and sleep meditations and things like that that you can use that I know are really helping people right now.
Yeah, they are helpful. Yes, there is on that Insight Timer, they, as you said, there's bedtime stories as well. Can I move forward into what I'm going to suggest now for the future? Now, some of the construction industry will already have this in place, but I think, you know, looking at the statistics in 2018, excuse me, this is on the UK Gov website, 6,507 people, adults, committed suicide, of which 4,903 were men. That's 13.3 male suicides a day. My thinking when I'm going around the vocational ballet schools and the dance companies is to make sure that they understand that I advocate every person that comes in contact, so that's all the members of staff that comes in contact with the dancers and some dancer representatives, do the mental health mental health first aid course. Now, some of the bigger firms within the construction industry, their training department could train to be trainers, so they can do in-house training for mental health first aid. So Maria, can you tell me whether that's already an ongoing thing in the industry?
It is, yeah. I actually, I've got a link on this, on the slides to Mental Health First Aid England, and I recorded a podcast with Simon Blake, their chief executive, a few weeks ago. And there are quite a lot of people in the industry who are trained in mental health first aid, and I definitely think that, you know, there's an opportunity for those people who are trained to kind of reach out online to support people, you know, through this crisis within their organisation.
I think it's also important because I came across this in South East London when I was lost a few months ago. I was in South East London trying to get to the Cutty Sarks. A lot of construction work going on there, and I asked someone, a construction worker, and he didn't speak English. And I went through about 3 people who didn't speak English until I found someone with broken English but actually directed me. So it's important that those first aiders, mental health first aiders, will speak enough European languages or be part of those communities to be able to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything else that you want to share with us that's particularly helping your clients get through this crisis right now?
I think what I've said is that there's an acceptance, and it's the level of acceptance of their own situation and what they can change and what they can't change. That is important. If you understand what you can change and you feel as though you can, then that's good.
Yeah.
And just the other points that I've already made.
Okay, thank you. Graham, have we got any questions for Terry?
There's only actually one question that's come in so far, and it might be one for Terry actually. It's from Daljit Sharma, and he says, what do you recommend that employers do to help their employees during lockdown?
I think in lockdown or out of lockdown is to listen and to be able to understand that the employees need to be listened to, not to be just brushed aside and something organized without their say-so, without being part of what's going on. I hope that answered that.
I think I can add to that a little bit because very soon after we went into lockdown, I hosted like a Zoom call with some people in my network, and one of the women on the call, she's a young architect, and she was saying that there was a lot of pressure at that time being put on people to quickly get to grips with like working from home and being productive and things like that. So I think it's I think employers, I know that things have probably settled down a bit since then, because that was probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago when I did that call. But I think, a lot of people, they've never experienced sort of working from home again. We're in this, we keep calling it unprecedented. It absolutely is. So I think it's the understanding that, it is going to be impacting on people's well-being, productivity. They're not going to be as productive as they potentially would have been had they been in the office. They're juggling all sorts of different things and different factors. So I think it's having that understanding about, all of the individual circumstances of the people in the organisation so that you can, help them individually, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that just came to mind about other things that could help. What about that cupboard under the stairs that holds all those hobbies and pastimes and crafts and things like that you pushed aside because there wasn't time? There's time now. You can go back to those and do that. There's loads of free online training, courses, that is. So either expanding on what you already know or out of interest. If you're interested in architecture, there's courses on architecture, there's courses on photography. So lots of little things that you can do so you can't say, I'm bored.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay. Any other questions, Graham, or was that?
At the moment, no. That's it as far as questions. But that's please fine. Bring in questions if you have them. Okay, brilliant.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Terry. I'm conscious that you said that you've got to go because you've got another client. So really thanks for your contribution.
That's okay then. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Okay. So touching on some of the things that Terry has already spoken about, here are some resources that can help you right now. So the first one is about meeting your emotional needs, so your human givens through lockdown. And I'll you'll get a copy of the slides. Obviously, they'll be part of the webinar replay, so you can revisit them and click on the links in your own time. But you know, the links here, I'll just, you know, bring some of the highlights to you. So with regards to meeting your emotional needs, and with regards to security and control, which is one of the human givens that I talked about earlier. So I think Terry touched on this before. It is natural for our imaginations to seek to solve problems, but with limited information, this can lead to trying to fill in the gaps with unhelpful worrying. So I think if you can remind yourself as often as you can that you've done all that you can with the information that you have, basically, I think is a useful thing to do. And as Terry said as well, creating routines to give yourself structure is really important. With regards to community, I mean, make sure you're staying connected with people. I know there's a lot of online networking happening. People I know are sort of having online sort of coffees and networking events, and it's really helping people to stay connected. I think there's a lot of online family quizzes and all sorts of things going on right now. With regards to privacy, which is something that Terry touched on as well, if you want to spend some time alone, you can agree a space with your family which people can use to spend time alone, free from distractions. So that's something that's been recommended to meet your emotional needs as well. Mental Health First Aid England resources. So Terry spoke about Mental Health First Aid England and becoming a mental health first aider. They've got some brilliant resources to help, including videos on stress and a toolkit for tackling stress as well. So, you know, we're going through a hugely stressful time right now. Things are constantly changing. And if you're stressed, the chemical reaction in your body shuts down the creative thinking part of your brain. So the creative thinking part that can help you kind of think outside the box is shut down when you're going through stress. So, you know, one of the things that helped me when I was a project manager was breathing. So if I like breathing techniques, and this is something I learned when I was trained to be a coach, and it's called 7-11 breathing. So if you breathe in for 7 counts and you breathe out for 11, it can really help you to calm you down and bring the stress levels down. This is something that I still use now, that I talk to my clients about as well. So I think something like that is really useful, but I definitely have a look at the resources on Mental Health First Aid England. And also building your resilience muscle is really important. So resilience is about how well a person can adapt to events in their life, and everyone can learn to increase their resilience abilities. And Sheryl Sandberg, who's the chief operating officer of Facebook, she wrote a book with Adam Grant, and she wrote this book after she lost her husband. So her husband died about 5 years ago, and she reached out to Adam Grant and asked the question, you know, how do I build resilience? Like, what is resilience and how do I get it? And this book is about building your resilience muscle. And some of the things that she talked about, so, you know, in this book, she says, when the future is uncertain, we can find strength from looking at the past when we face personal hardship. So we know that this crisis is going to end. So we will get through it. And I think a lot of us survived the Great Recession back in sort of 2009, 2010. So we've been through tough times before. We'll get through them again. You know, this crisis, it feels awful in the middle of it right now, but we will get through it. There will be an end to it. And I think that's a really comforting thing to think about, and, you know, that can help you build resilience. And Terry also talked about 5 things to be grateful for. So this is something that Sheryl talks about in her book as well, about the practice of daily gratitude. So if you can find things around you to be grateful for, that can really help you in the moment. And this is something that, you know, I use myself. I encourage my clients to use as well. You know, if I'm sort of having trouble sleeping sometimes, or if I'm in a tough moment, I try and find something to be grateful for, which helps me feel better in that moment. And also going back to what Terry said earlier, So Terry was saying about focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. We're surrounded by things that we can't control. And this is a quotation from Viktor Frankl. Everything in life can be taken away from you except for your freedom to choose how you respond. And some of you may have heard of Viktor Frankl, or you may not. He was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist, and he survived the Holocaust and wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And his mindset and techniques such as visualization, which I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit, they got him through those terrible experiences, and he went on to write the book Man's Search for Meaning. And I think that's so true. Everything in life can be taken away from you except for your freedom to choose how you respond. So think about what you can control. And also thinking about fear. A lot of us will be experiencing fear, and it can come and go. But this passage was in a book that I read recently by Kubi Springer called I Am My Brand, and I recorded a podcast with her recently, and she tells a story about there was once a young man who was about to turn into an adult. As part of the local tradition, he went to the medicine man before he became an adult in the tribe. When he went there, the medicine man told him, "Here is this dog. It represents love, joy, positivity, happiness, kindness, and faith. Here is this wolf. It represents hate, pain, negativity, cruelty, and fear. Both the dog and the wolf live inside of you, and they're fighting." The young man looked amazed and said, "Who's going to win?" And the medicine man took his hands and said, "Whichever one you choose to feed. So you can feed your dog, or you can feed your wolf." And I talked at the very beginning about the fact that we have got an opportunity to pause, reflect, and reset. And I truly feel that we need a different way of thinking to get through the next few months. We need to feed the dog and not the wolf. And I want to give your actions a focal point as well. So I want you to feel like you're working towards something. So your bigger picture. And if you're feeling out of control, like everything's been taken away from you, it can be hard to take positive action. But thinking about who you are, and what your values are, and what your purpose is, it can help you identify what you want for your future. So for me personally, I always felt like, I was destined to do things to bring change, and that's what led me to, to do the work that I'm doing right now. But I had no idea at that stage, how that was going to evolve. So a big question for you to think about is, what do you want for your future? And where do you want to be in 12 months' time? So if you want to revisit these slides after this presentation, have a think about where do you want to be in 12 months' time. So you've got a focal point, you've got a North Star to help sort of navigate through this crisis right now. And also thinking about purpose. If you have a strong purpose in life, you don't have to be pushed. Your passion will drive you there. So purpose, I think, is true for individuals and for businesses as well. Companies with a strong sense of purpose are more profitable and their people are more engaged. And that's exactly what we need right now. I think if companies can think about what their sense of purpose is, and if individuals can think about what their sense of purpose is, it can help them to feel sort of fired up and think about what they want to do and how they're going to get through this crisis and beyond. Future mapping is a technique that we used. So the Construction Industry Council used this when we set our strategic priorities. So we got together, I think it was about 5 years ago, to look at where we wanted to be in the future. And future mapping was a technique that we used. And it's a technique to help you think as if you were already there. So if you imagine that you're already there, you've already achieved what you wanted to achieve in the next 12 months. You can then look backwards from the future and imagine how you got there. And it's an important shift from looking forward from the present, because what's happening right now could hold you back. So, if you're thinking about where you want to be, but you're thinking about it from the circumstances that you're in right now, it could feel really difficult to think about the future. But if you use a technique such as future mapping to think about, this is what I want to do, and then think about, you know, working backwards how you achieved it, it can just bring you more freedom of thought. So I would definitely have a look at that exercise. But also have a think about, where were you before? And reflecting back on the human givens, did you have balance? Were you burning out? Somebody talked about this the other day, a stop doing list. So like, if you think about some of the things that you were doing before that you don't want to do moving forwards, like what would those be? What boundaries do you feel that you need to set for yourself moving forwards? And Terry touched on that one as well when we were talking earlier about how, you know, things are going to be different, and think about what you want to take out of this crisis and bring into your everyday practice. And also a big question is, what is the best possible outcome for you at the end of this crisis? Like, where do you want to be when we get through this? So if it's just, you know, if you're navigating your business through this, where do you want your business to be? Where do you want to be personally? You know, what do you want to achieve? I think if you can give your actions some focal point and set yourself some goals and targets, I think that can really help. And what action can you take during this crisis to get you closer to where you want to be? So as you can imagine, as a coach, I'm a great one for this, thinking about the action and the action plan. So actually getting things down in writing as well. So there's a model that we use in coaching called the GROW model. And this stands for, so the G is for goal. So what's your goal? What do you want to achieve? The R is about the reality. So what's the reality of the situation that you're in right now? What options have you got? So what could you do? And the W is about what will you do? So that's your commitment as to what you're going to do moving forward. So, you know, think about where you want to be, and, you know, start putting an action plan in place that's going to help you get you closer to where you want to be. Because I think if you feel that you're moving towards something, then I think that will definitely help from a mindset perspective. And just some tools and techniques that I use personally and that help me with my clients. I, you know, encourage my clients to use some of these as well. But also what I wanted to say at the beginning, which I didn't, was that I've actually experienced depression myself. So I had depression back in 2003. So I know what it's like from a personal point of view, and some of these tools and techniques really helped me at that time. So the first one is to meditate, as Terry said earlier. And this could just be something simple, just focusing on the breath. And this is what I do. Like, I try and meditate every morning. And all I do when I'm meditating is just focusing on my breathing and just trying not to sort of let the thoughts take over. But as Terry said as well, there are some great apps out there that can help you. The Calm app is brilliant. I mean, I recommended that to one of my friends who's actually, she was diagnosed with cancer just before, like, we went into lockdown. And I recommended the Calm app, and that's really, really helped her. So I would definitely recommend that one. And have a listen to the podcast as well with Joanna May, if you're listening to podcasts. Journaling. So this is something that I do, and I know a few people who do journaling, and it's really about getting your thoughts down on paper. And I asked myself this question a few months ago, like, do men journal? Because I know women do, but I don't know if that's something that men do as well. And I actually Googled that, and I came across Ollie Applin. So Ollie Applin had written a piece for The Guardian about men, encouraging men to journal. And he went through a really traumatic experience. So Ollie Applin he's the founder of the Mind Journal, which is a journal that's specifically for men. And he discovered journaling because when he was young, well, I think he was sort of in his early 20s, at university, his mum committed suicide, and he'd been, you know, he'd lived with his mum's mental health challenges like the whole time that he was growing up, and I think she'd had a number of suicide attempts, and he'd actually found her as well on a number of occasions, and he felt like he couldn't talk about it, and he was just told constantly, just don't tell anybody what, you know, what's happening. And he buried everything. So when his mum did take her own life, he just buried everything and he just tried to get on with things. And then about 3 years later, he had a mental breakdown, and he went to see a counsellor, but he really struggled to talk about how he was feeling, because he'd been told constantly, don't talk about it. And she suggested journaling, so writing down his thoughts. And that really helped him like open up the conversation with his therapist. So that was what compelled him to encourage men to journal as well. And so yeah, I would have a listen to the podcast, and if you Google Ollie Applin and the Mind Journal, you'll find the piece on The Guardian as well. Visualization. So visualization is a technique that I get my clients to use as well. So neuroscience, there's more and more research being done into how the brain works. And neuroscience shows us that we can take back control of our minds by rewiring our brain's pathways to make lasting positive changes to our lives. And this is something that, you know, top athletes and sports people and business people use as well to program their mind for success. So your brain cannot tell the difference between what is real or what is imagined. So a lot of athletes will run a race in their mind. And what they found is, like, when they put sensors on the brain, is that the same areas of the brain heat up as if, like, when they're visualizing running a race, as to when they actually run the race. So that's what it's saying here. Your brain cannot tell the difference between what is real or what is imagined. Visualization is a performance enhancer. So our brains interpret the imagery we are creating in our mind's eye as a fact. And research shows that visualization creates new neural pathways in our brains to help us achieve our vision. And I used this recently with one of my clients. So one of my clients was struggling last year. So he'd set, you know, goals and targets, like financial goals and targets that he wanted to achieve in his business. And he was feeling very disheartened because he had a pipeline of work. He had the spreadsheet set out, and there was quite a few chunks of the spreadsheet that were amber. So they were the uncertain ones. He didn't know if he was going to win these projects or not. He was feeling very disheartened, and he said, well, if I don't achieve like this in the next month or so, I don't think I'm going to achieve my targets at all. And so what I got him to do was to visualize, like get him to create another spreadsheet and get him to turn all of the bars green. So basically when he looked at it, he was feeling the feelings as if he'd achieved it, as if it was already there, and he'd won the work, secured the pipeline. And that just helped him from a mindset perspective hugely. And it's also impacted on his end results at the end of the year as well. It massively impacted on his profit margins, and he's in a really strong position now amidst this crisis because of like the work that he's done, and because of the mindset work that we've done together as well. So I would definitely look into visualization. And if you've got a goal that you want to achieve, you can visualize yourself achieving that goal. So thinking about leaders and managers, what they can do, and this was a question that was asked earlier about support. So have a think about what is the best possible outcome for your organisation and your people, and set some goals and targets in connection with that. But also how you communicate with people is really important. So, you know, make sure that they're on board, they can see what you want to achieve, how they can contribute. So I think communication is just massively important right now. Think about your purpose and your brand. So I think what's going to help companies come through this stronger is thinking about their purpose. So purpose-driven organizations have been proven to be more profitable, and purpose is about how you connect with your client, and your brand is about your emotional connection with your client. So if you think about those things, they're really going to stand you in good stead for when we come through this. And also, are you being as strategic as you could be right now with your talent? So, you know, how have you got people kind of operating right now, like, you know, other things that they might be able to be doing? You know, I know that schools particularly are crying out for content and support with careers advice, and you know, there might be some content that like younger people in the organization could be creating to attract the next generation into the industry, and use social media and things like that. So, you know, just have a think about that for your companies right now, and how can you grow your people through this crisis. So there's a lot of CPD available, and even if, you know, you've furloughed people in your company, how can they be working on their own growth? So if you think about, you know, what courses could be useful for your teams right now, you know, what free courses are available for people. So how can they feel that they're growing through this, and they will be in a better position when they come through the other side. And also managing difficult conversations. There's going to be a lot of difficult conversations to be had through this crisis and beyond. If anybody wants any help or support with that, then just drop me an email. It's maria@constructioncoach.co.uk, and I can send you some extracts from a training course that I wrote and delivered to help you manage difficult conversations. And for business owners, think about what is the best possible outcome for your business. Visualize the outcome that you want. And think about your purpose and brand as well. I've got a client in Cameroon in Africa, and she has got a construction company. She's on a mission to bring affordable housing to Cameroon. And Cameroon, I mean, you know, without having to go through, you know, without the fact that they're going through a huge crisis, the corona crisis right now, they've actually been in the civil war for the past 2 or 3 years, which is, you know, massively impacting on how you can do things. And so when we had a coaching session last week, we basically, I sat with her and said, right, you know, what is the best possible outcome that you could achieve through this crisis? Where do you want to be? And she was feeling frustrated at that time because she was all set to start her first affordable housing project, and she was so excited about it. But because of this crisis, it's now on hold. So what I wanted to do was help her get fired up and think, right, well, what can you do? You know, what can you do towards this goal right now that's going to help? So she's got a list of things she can work on to still feel that like she's moving forwards, but it's going to help her take her closer to where she wants to be ultimately. And I'm getting her to think about her brand, how she gets her messages across, how she gets her passion for affordable housing across to people, so that they might want to invest in the future. So those are all things that she can think about right now that's going to help move her forwards. But have a think about what sets you apart from your competition. Like I was talking to my client about this morning. You know, he's a contractor, small builder down south. And, you know, we were talking about how can he start getting messages across in marketing that's really showing how he's different from his competitors. And I think sustainability has got a big part to play in this as well, because you know, I did an interview with Richard Threlfall, who's the global head of infrastructure for KPMG, and he's also on the World Economic Forum for brain's gone, infrastructure, sorry. And he went to Davos earlier this year, which is where the World Economic Forum gather every year for their global conference. And what he said was everybody was talking about climate change and sustainability this year, which felt different for the year before. So obviously the work that's being done, the awareness that's being raised is starting to pay off. So people are starting to talk about this more, and they want to look at this agenda more. And I think he showed me a picture, like he sent me this picture on WhatsApp, and it showed a baby shark, which is the corona crisis, COVID-19, just about to be swallowed by a bigger shark, which is the economic fallout of this crisis, which is going to be devoured by an even bigger shark, which is climate change. And that's not going anywhere. So I do think that sustainability is a way of, if you're focusing on that agenda, more and more procurement models are going to be looking at this. The housing market, the domestic market. I think if you can reach people's hearts and minds with sustainability, then you could potentially be setting yourself aside from your competition, because they would potentially choose someone who is going to have less of an impact on the planet. So I definitely think sustainability is something to focus on for business owners right now, and an action plan as well as to, what goals can you set for yourself in the next 3 months to get through this crisis, so you've got a North Star to lead you. So that concludes the presentation. I was just going to take you through some links quickly. So the first one is an online coaching program that I'm going to be launching in the next week, which is called Rich Thinking for Uncertain Times. And it's a 4-week online program to pause, reflect and reset. And it's going to include some of the questions that I've just been talking about in this presentation. And have a look at the Construction Revolution podcast. So this is my podcast. There's some great content on there about purpose, values, journaling, meditation, mental health first aid, brand. There's some really good content that I think will really help you just think about how you can use that to get through this crisis and beyond. And I've got some recommended books on there as well that you can have a look at. So there's links there. And there's the Calm and the Headspace app. But also, just briefly, I've included a link about how to deal with grief and bereavement through COVID-19. One of my clients lost his uncle a couple of weeks ago, and I sort of did some research and sent this information to him. So I just thought I'd include this on here as well. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and let me know if you've got any questions.
Okay, Maria, we do have some questions actually, and I'm going to put them to you on behalf of the questioner. I'm going to start with a question from Raksha Mystery, and the question is, how would you try and keep positive and proactive when in the position of searching for a new job in this current time? This is particularly in the context of looking at where you want to be in the future.
Okay, so an exercise that I've used with people, with my clients before, is it's a timeline. So doing a timeline of your experience can help you to really build resilience. So like if you reflect back as to everything that you've done, all of the experience that you've done, like and it helps you kind of build up a picture of everything that you've achieved. And it can really help your mindset to think about what you've done, so that you feel more confident moving forwards when you're looking for a job. So I definitely recommend like doing that exercise. I worked with someone last year who was looking for a new opportunity. And I got him to sort of use visualization as well. Like think about the type of company that you want to work for. Like, what kind of values do you want that company to have? Like, have a think about, do some research on the type of organization that you'd want to work for, to help you sort of with that, visualization.
Thank you. There's another question from February Phillips, and she says, any ideas about how to introduce discussions about improving mental health within your business? So how do you bring that up with your employees, I think is the question.
I would have a look on the Mental Health First Aid England website, because they've got some really great tools and resources on there. But when I spoke to Simon and I asked him a similar question, so he's the chief executive. I think it's just asking how people are. You know, I think from an opening perspective, but just asking how people are, because, you know, sometimes we just don't think to ask that question, but I think people more and more are asking that. So, you know, if you're having online meetings, I think people are asking those questions, like, how are you doing? You know, how are you finding things? How are you coping? You know, more of those questions are being asked. But I would definitely have a look on the mental health First Aid England website as well.
Thank you. And I've got another question that came in by email, actually, saying, how can you remain positive when we're all surrounded by such negative news?
Don't read the news, for starters. I mean, I interviewed a guy called Rob Moore on Friday, who he's a millionaire property investor, and he's written a book about money as well. And he talked about the importance of like the environment that you create for yourselves. So I think if you can feed yourself with as much positive information as possible, then I think that is a good thing to do. Like, you know, can you listen to some positive books on Audible? Can you listen to some podcasts that are going to help you think more positively? If you get clear on where you want to be at the end of this crisis and what you want to achieve, then you can then consume content that's going to help take you closer to where you want to be, rather than like just, you know, reading the news and being sort of influenced by all of the uncertainty that's out there right now.
Thank you. And we've got a point from PA, just initials, saying, how can we download this webinar? I'd like to share it with people who will benefit from it. Thank you very much. Well, the webinar will be, the links to the recording of the webinar will be on the CIC website, which is www.cic.org.uk. It'll probably be there later today, I think. And Maria, your slides will be there too, yeah? Yeah,
so the slides are part of that. The link should work, but I mean, you can also put the slides on separately as well. You know, if people just want to download the slides.
Well, thank you. We've got no more questions, but I'll finish off. There's a couple of comments that have been made. I think there's a really good one here from Neil Orkwood, and he says, this is not a question, but we've started a weekly newsletter that isn't very long, but it provides an update to staff on what's new over the week. It tries not to focus on COVID-19 specific issues, but to be as normal as possible. And it includes personal involvement too. It works really well, keeping us all connected on a social level. I think that's really good advice, Neil. I don't know if you want to comment, Maria.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, you know, that sounds like a great thing to do, definitely. I was just reading one of the things on the chat as well. Somebody said, thank you for your presentation. I've started to read The Chimp Paradox. Do you think it's any good to get in a good headspace? Yes, I've read The Chimp Paradox. So The Chimp Paradox was written by the author, Steve, I can't remember his second name, but he's the sports psychologist who trained the Olympic cycling team, basically. And he's written this book called The Chimp Paradox, and the chimp is like the it's a bit like the gremlin that sits on your shoulder that can, you know, take over you sometimes and give you lots of negative self-talk and things like that. And it's about like how you can overcome that, basically.
Yeah, Steve Peters.
Yeah.
I actually I knew him when I was team manager of the fencing team. When he was in Beijing. Well, I think we're out of questions. There's a lot of people saying thank you so much. It's been a useful, timely seminar. So can I just finish? We're literally coming up to 3 o'clock, which is our time. Can I thank, well, first Terry, I will write to him to thank him, even though he's not online at the moment. And most of all, of course, Maria, because I think you really have given us a very insightful seminar. And it's been remarkable, actually. This is the 4th one of these we've done, and I think we've kept more people from the beginning to the end than on any one of the previous webinars. So that's a lot of credit to you, Maria. So as I say, this will be on our website if you want to run it back or share it with other people. And we look forward to welcoming you at future webinars. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
I think it's time to go and do other things now. So goodbye, everyone. Keep well, keep safe.
Thank you. Thanks very much.